Greetings, friends. Taras Petrenko is with you in the studio. The House of Representatives of the U.S. Congress has voted in favor of a bill aimed at continuing support for Ukraine. A majority of congressmen in the House backed this legislation. Alongside the Democrats, who voted almost unanimously in favor of the document, with the exception of only one Democratic congresswoman who joined the majority of Republicans. 18 Republican lawmakers also voted to approve the bill supporting Ukraine. In the era of Donald Trump, this in itself represents a shocking shift in the position of the House of Representatives of the U.S. Congress. It is worth recalling that the vote took place virtually against the wishes of Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson, who did not want to bring the bill to the floor for debate. Nevertheless, a majority in the House proposed putting the bill on the agenda despite the Speaker's opposition. While enough Democrats supported this move, their numbers alone were insufficient to override the Speaker's position. At that point, 4 Republican congressmen joined them. And as we can see, 18 Republicans ultimately voted in favor of the bill itself. This happened despite the fact that many Republicans faced direct pressure from both the Speaker and members of the administration, who argued that passing a law in support of Ukraine could hinder President Trump's peacekeeping efforts. The bill is highly significant and extremely important. If finally approved, it would reinstate the Lend-Lease Act from the moment the legislation comes into force. This would allow President Trump to provide Ukraine with weapons and ammunition on credit through deferred payment agreements. The bill also an $8 billion credit line for Ukraine and NATO allies to purchase American weapons and ammunition. This is roughly the same approach that President of the United States Joseph Biden used to support Ukraine during the early years of the large-scale Russian-Ukrainian war. Annual funding for the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative would also be restored. The bill would require the administration to continue providing Ukraine with essential intelligence information without interruption. As we know, the Trump administration has repeatedly threatened its Ukrainian partners with cutting off such intelligence sharing. In addition, sanctions policy toward Russia would be significantly strengthened. If, within 15 days after the bill's adoption, Russia refuses to stop its war against Ukraine, the administration would be required to intensify sanctions pressure on the Russian economy, and quite seriously. Any importer bringing Russian goods into the United States would face a 500% tariff. This would effectively eliminate any trade between American businesses and the Russian Federation. And we fully understand how such measures could impact Russia's ability to trade with the rest of the world. A separate section of the bill is devoted to supporting the Baltic states, which now find themselves, so to speak, on the front line of future Russian imperial ambitions, as Russia constantly threatens them with destabilization and aggression. Another provision within the package emphasizes the need to strengthen Euro-Atlantic solidarity and commitment to NATO. As we can see, this document is truly serious and highly important, restoring the leading role of the United States in both European and global foreign policy. That is, of course, if it is ultimately passed, because approval in the House of Representatives alone is far from sufficient. The bill must now theoretically pass through the Senate. However, the Senate is under no obligation to consider every bill received from the House of Representatives. There is no mechanism for bypassing the Republican Senate leadership in order to push such legislation through. The Senate operates under entirely different rules. And there is virtually no doubt that the Republican Senate leader, Senator Thune, will not place this bill on the Senate agenda. Therefore, nothing threatening the plans of the current American administration is likely to occur unless the President of the United States himself wants the Senate to consider this legislation. And finally, even if we imagine the nearly impossible scenario in which Senator Thune defies the administration, brings the bill to a vote in the Senate, and it is approved, and there may indeed be enough votes in the Senate for such a Ukraine support bill, President Trump would still be free to veto legislation already approved by both the Senate and the House of Representatives. After that, both chambers of Congress would need a 2/3 majority to override the presidential veto. Thus, one could say that this is merely a political gesture by the House of Representatives that, by itself, will not lead to the restoration of aid to Ukraine. And yet, it is not that simple, because the United States is approaching congressional midterm elections. According to many observers, these elections could at least give Democrats control of the House of Representatives. If the global energy and economic crisis continues to intensify, and few today doubt that humanity is standing on the brink of such a crisis, particularly due to the inability to unblock the Strait of Hormuz, then it is possible that Republicans, amid worsening living conditions in the United States itself, could also lose control of the Senate. In that case, the Democratic Senate leadership would bring the already House-approved bill to a Senate vote, and it would undoubtedly pass. Yes, President Trump would still have the option to block it, but this could trigger a very realistic search for the two-thirds majority required to override a presidential veto. And this is something the White House would absolutely want to avoid, because it would expose its weakness in relations with both the House of Representatives and the Senate. In such circumstances, President Trump may seek a compromise solution that could result in the current bill being signed into law in a modified form. Most importantly, Trump himself would then possess a real instrument of pressure on Russian President Vladimir Putin, who shows no intention of ending the Russian-Ukrainian war, partly because he remains convinced that Donald Trump's administration will not interfere with his ability to continue the war in the coming years. The current bill demonstrates that if Putin misses the opportunity to end the war at its present stage, he may instead face a dramatically increased level of American support for Ukraine. This could lead to devastating consequences for one of the most abhorrent regimes in modern human history, the Russian Chekist regime. And Donald Trump himself would retain a genuine tool of pressure against Putin in the form of this legislation, which could at any moment be sent to the Senate and signed by the American president. In that sense, it would become a kind of guillotine blade hanging over the Russian dictator's neck, capable of falling at any moment. Thank you, friends. Stay with this channel, subscribe to it, and all the best to you.